Wall Street spends billions perfecting strategy and almost nothing on the one edge that actually separates the fund titans from the fund tourists. So if you're in high finance and your returns do not reflect your research, then this conversation was made for you. Here we go. Evan, welcome to the show, man.
Ryan, I appreciate you having me. You're talking about some of my favorite topics right now. Finance, which I did for a long time, and mental performance. If anybody knows this, the mental edge is the ultimate prize in finance. When you're talking about, I have one line that I always use. I think I have to get another one soon. You have to be comfortable in the uncertainty and confident in your behavior. That is the key to this whole game. As we look at these markets and ever-changing and adaptability, if your mental foundation isn't there, walk away. Period. The end. That's how strong I feel about this.
Yeah. So you got those steel nerves that you've earned over decades of being a professional trader and a Wall Street legend, man. So I'm excited to have you here, buddy. So let's dive in. So my question for you is, what is the single psychological pattern you see in underperforming fund managers that no one on the desk is talking about?
There's one word, impulsivity, which by the way is reacting. So when you don't have a strong mental foundation in a sea of chaos and uncertainty, and you don't have the ability to pause and take mental space, and instead you react, those reactions are not coming from the knowledge you know, but from past experiences. So you're literally, you're reliving experiences over and over again, as opposed to creating new behaviors. So when you said in the beginning about controlling emotions, we actually control behavior. Emotions are just the data points that guide us in order to choose conscious behavior. So when you look at underperforming managers, and if you poll them, ask them, what do you think your biggest problem is? They go, I can't stop reacting. Once we're able to understand why they're reacting and get them in the space of responding, then it's time to invest with them. But it sounds so simple, but like anything else, it takes training. And you need to be visible in the moment. So you can meditate all you want at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. But if you're not visible in the moment to make best decisions, because that's where it counts.
Brilliant. So then how does, let's say, so we talked about acting versus overreacting. What about overconfident? What have you seen? I'm sure let's talk about the other side of that spectrum. How is overconfidence, which is never really a compliment, sometimes it is, but in the case of trading and fund managers and managing assets, how does overconfidence play into underperformance?
So overconfidence is sometimes in line with a feeling of euphoria. Quote unquote, I could do no wrong. I know what I'm doing at any moment, at any time. I'm the best at this and always will be. And as we know, markets will humble you. So when I go back to emotions, there's a range of emotions. Let's say 1 is panic and 7 is euphoria. We have to understand in our personal dictionaries of emotions, there are certain areas you don't make best decisions. So when you're overconfident, you're kind of too loose. You kind of stray from the basics of mental performance. So when I hear clients, when I can pick up these overconfident, red flags are being thrown all over the place because it's a bad place to make decisions. So what happens, so the question is, when you realize you're overconfident, when news flow is coming in, you're not responding appropriately because you think you know everything or whatever it may be, that should give you a hint. That's a data point saying, wait a second, I need to downregulate because when I'm feeling this way, my behavior starts to react. We don't pick up on the cues that are necessary. That's very important. So that's why we talk about downregulation, being visible in the moment. For me, I spent 25 years doing this. And believe it or not, my go-to feeling where I perform my best was being nervous.
Why do you think that is?
So being nervous to me, maybe when I was 12 wasn't so great. But I realized that as my career was going on, I was always nervous at a certain point on a certain trade. And I began to realize that being nervous actually meant I was dialed in. So nervousness to me was a great place to make best decisions. That's my experience. So as you get to know yourself better and better, and you start building this personal dictionary of emotions, you start to now align with different behaviors. So instead of running away when I was nervous, I was dialed in. I took that mental space, and that was the place I always wanted to be. Because it meant something to me. Something was going on that piqued my curiosity. I could feel it viscerally in my body. I knew to take a breath, and that's the place I wanted to be in. So for you, Ryan, it may be very different. For Johnny Trader, Beth Trader may be very different. But once you start to really understand, become a student of yourself, that is the place to be. Overconfidence is never a great place to make decisions. Confidence is a great place to make decisions if you understand that and know the difference.
That's brilliant. So does that come into, because you've been frequently, and I've heard you say this before, is pressure is a privilege. Is that kind of what you're talking about there? Is to say, maybe when I was 12, I'd run from it, but now I understand it makes me pay attention, it makes me lock in. Is that what we're saying? It's a privilege to have pressure?
Well, so when we say pressure is a privilege, which actually comes from Billie Jean King, the tennis player, pressure is a privilege, meaning it's a responsibility. Yeah. So Ryan Miller, I am giving you this role to do this with a lot more pressure. So I'm giving you more responsibility. It's a privilege. I really think that you not only can do it, but you can far exceed our expectations. That's still a lot of pressure. So when we say pressure is a privilege, it's a privilege to sit in a seat of trading, running money, CEO, professional athlete. So it's a privilege. So how do you now take that responsibility and instead of surviving, thrive? It's really a reframe on that. So I like my people being under pressure. That means we're in the right seat. We have the right capabilities. Now it's the mental game that's so important. And now how do they respond in the moment? That's why it's a privilege. Somebody's bestowing onto you this responsibility. Now we need to show up. I get very intense about these things, as you can tell.
I love it. And let's keep the fire, brother. So with that said, I'd love to let's start peeling this back even deeper. Maybe you can walk us through the exact mental protocol that a PM should run when a position moves hard against them.
So obviously there's mental priming way before that. It's like going to the gym and working out and all those things. So when we think of trading, portfolio management, anything in finance that involves high risk, you have to treat it like a performance sport. Even though trading psychology is different than sports psychology, but there are many overlaps. So the question is, way before you have to make this big decision, what have you done before that? How do you sleep? How do you actually go to bed? How do you wake up in the morning and start priming yourself mentally? When you start putting those reps in, when the moment that you need to be visible, right, that high stakes decision that you need to make, we're already setting ourselves up for it. So when that moment comes, which it's going to come, right? Positive psychology is not going to help you in this one, right? This is the reality that we live in. So how do my people get ready in that moment of chaos where they need to make best decisions? So now as we primed ourselves into that moment, we have a routine, right? We set intention. Where do I need to be? How do I need to get better? Now the moment comes. So now meditating at 4 a.m, it's helpful, but is it going to help me now to really have a solid foundation to make best decisions? So now whatever happened, trade goes up, trade goes down, it goes against us. I want to make sure that I can create space to make a best decision here. Do I need to add? Do I need to sell? Whatever it may be, but it can't be impulsive. So as it's moving, my heart rate is racing, right? I feel a little rigid. So now I'm picking at somatic. I'm picking this up. Now I'm getting scared. I'm getting a little panicked. All right, normal. Acknowledge that. What is going on here? Okay, I feel panicked. I feel really nervous. I feel scared. Okay. Space. So what does that do right there, Ryan? It really starts to block off that reacting. So what's interesting about this, you have to verbalize it. You just can't think I'm panicked and I'm nervous because it is already going on in your head. Once it leaves your mouth, you get to see what it looks like. Now we're creating space. This is in seconds, like in a second or two. All right, where do I need to be right now? Now we're conscious. That took above 3 seconds right there. So now we're conscious. What do I need to do? We are in a much better situation to make a better decision than we are when we panic and we react. Now, obviously, that sounds so simple. Like, oh, really? That's nothing. Try it. Try in the heat of the moment. And obviously, at this time in the markets, there's a lot of heat of the moments. Try to be visible in that moment. Push back for a second. Open up your body. Okay, I feel nervous. Where do I need to be? What behavior do I need to do right now? How should I respond? Now, you do this over and over again. So now the emotions don't change. You can't control an emotion. It's just a data point. But now as we create these new behaviors, what it does is it starts to build a new experience in our brain. Mm-hmm. So now the brain's like, well, when he's nervous, he does this now. And this is the experience. Because we know the brain is always predicting. How's this going to make me feel? What happens if I get this wrong? That's catastrophe. All these things are going on. But when it starts to predict into the future, the pool it's predicting from is past events. So then it's our job to build new experience that go into that pool. So now through the course of repetition, we start to put new stuff in that pool. So now when Ryan Miller PM is feeling nervous, things are going right, say, wait a second, he doesn't react any longer. Why does he respond like that, even if he is nervous? That is mental training. And then what happens over the course of repetition, again and again and again, neurally in our brain, it starts to rewire. So now our default, not little Evan running away when he was 12, when he was nervous, now he sits in the pocket and he responds and doesn't react. So what may look to you as like I'm reacting, that is response, but in nanoseconds, because I've trained myself to behave this way. This is all about emotions and data and conscious behavior, again and again and again, until you start rewiring your brain. So the question always is, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? So my game as a mental performance coach is marrying the why and the how. Why do I do what I do? And how do I get better? And how do I change? So we know on the psychoanalytical side that a lot of this stuff comes from where? Childhood. It comes from pre-programming. So it's our job now to redo the programming in our brain for the things that no longer serve us. So it sounds like I'm going to put you on the couch right now, but I'm not, because what happens is as we start to change behavior, the why I do what I do starts to come out. So when you think about therapy, and I'm pro-therapy, but this is not a dig on therapy, but for therapy, we're always thinking of the why. What coaching is, and what we do is the marriage between why and how, because we really want these changes to be repeatable, sustainable, and leverageable. And that's where growth happens. So it sounds very Herculean, but it's really not. Change happens anywhere. If you decide to go to bed a half hour earlier and wake up a half hour earlier and go for a walk, and you've never done it, that's change. Now you start to do that, you start to build evidence. And then evidence with consistency builds what? Confidence. Now, how is waking up earlier and going to bed earlier and walking in the morning help your trading? Because it believes a belief system. All this stuff starts to connect. You're an entrepreneur. You know this. Like, we have to take risks, but there's got to be a consistency in what we do. Are we going to be right all the time? The answer absolutely is no. However, we could put ourselves in spots of best decision making. Only time will tell us if we're right. But I can guarantee we start stacking best decisions that are conscious, I'll bet on it.
Good. I love what you said about putting ourselves in a position of best decision making. I'm gonna pin that on my wall, brother. That is incredible.
But you gotta just real quick. But you gotta slow down.
Good.
So when I say slow down, to be like, no, man, I gotta keep going. No, that's not what I mean. Slowing down in order to speed up is the art of intentionality. Has nothing to do with gas. Nothing. It's back to what you were just saying. It's back to best decisions.
I love that. You know, making those decisions, and you talked about because we talk a lot about fundraising and fund management. And so as you go out and let's say you go and fundraise and you raise capital and then you execute on it, there's one thing, the common thread between all of that is your thesis. And so my question for you, Evan, is how does a fund manager stay convicted to that thesis without becoming stubborn? Sometimes I call that aggressive patience, right? So slow down and go for it. Like, you got a lot of tools in your toolbox, man. So how do they stay convicted to a thesis without being stubborn and inflexible, and now you're making stupid choices?
It's a great question. So I just want to clarify, when we talk about aggressive patience, at M1, it's one of our pillars. We look at it slightly different. So when we say patience, we assume that's passive, where aggressive patience is almost that jaguar in a brush. Oh, I've never seen a jaguar in a brush, but I keep going back to this, where the heart is in control. It is just ready to strike. So when we say aggressive patience, is preparation, behavioral control, and readiness to go. That's what we consider aggressive patience. And it is a great place to constantly be, because it puts you in that responsive instead of reactive nature. Now, when we talk about when things go awry for analysts, PMs, but it really starts a little bit before that. So I had a call with a client of mine in London, and we had the same issue. And the discussion was, when we have ideas, how do we actually know it's a good idea or not a good idea? So we can obviously do our research, whatever it may be, but are we asking ourselves enough questions? So what does that exactly mean? So if I was long a stock, let's say, I would look at my analysts and I would say, call every single bear analyst on Wall Street. I want to know why they don't like it. Please poke holes in my story. So I want to know where the bulls lie and the bears lie. And then I want to know where sentiment is. So once I understand that, you have to ask yourself additional, what would make me react if this went against me? Where would I add if it went against me and it was just noise? But the thing is, you just can't do that in the moment. That has to be sort of your structure. If this happens, I'll do this. If that. So when the moment happens, you have a better ability to sit in the pocket and make, once again, best decisions. Now, if let's say things change and a lot of people have confirmation bias, right, which gets in the way, and all these other biases, you have to ask these questions. Has anything changed in the scenario? Do I have confirmation bias? But once again, Ryan, it's got to come out of your mouth. This doesn't take that long. You have to be willing to ask yourselves these questions. Am I reacting because I'm scared? Because we're all human beings. Nobody's perfect. But the better we are to start asking these self-exploratory questions, who's asking ourselves questions, that's what that is. It puts us in a better seat of consciousness. Why? Well, one's very simple, because we're able to ask the question. I forgot to ask myself that question. That means we're reacting. The better we get at this, the better chance we have at what again? Best decisions. We could do all the work, have an edge, done everything correct, and still be wrong. Right? We're dealing with uncertainty. We don't know duration and time, how long it takes. So we're not in a business. We're obviously in the business of making money, not being right. And we're in the business really of inputs. So when you think about, people get lost in confirmation bias because they're thinking about a couple things. One, they're thinking about the outcome, which is quite obvious, but also they're looking at, am I going to feel embarrassed? Am I going to feel rejected? Am I going to feel judged? So now it is no longer about the marketing. It's about who? You. It becomes personal. So the best way for that to stay personal is to ask questions, speak out loud so you can see the words. I mean, you can't see words, but you can see the experience. The better you get at this, I'm sure, Ryan, I mean, you do a lot of things. And I'm sure when you have a moment with yourself, you ask yourself a couple of questions. What am I thinking right here? What is the best decision I can make here? But I know I need to make a decision. So what is that going to look like? You weigh the pros and cons a little bit, and then you make a decision. Now, if you said, no, I just think about things and I just make decisions, I'd say, listen, you should hire me. Right? But you don't. You know you don't. Right? You have a lot of things going on. So you need this clarity. And clarity comes from verbalizing what's going on in your head. I like to say I take it from the dark to the light. And it's interesting also because what we do, and follow this because it's pretty important. My job is to bring the unconscious conscious. Make it visible of whatever the interferences are that are going on in your head. And then through proper repetition, we become unconsciously conscious. And what exactly is that? That's called flow. Just like that. And that's repetition. So when people, how you make it look so easy. Well, I've done this so many times that it may look easy too, but I put so much intention into this and so much repetition and so much practice. And it's when you build this mental foundation, and you know this because you do a lot of different, you're not going to be doing the same thing you're doing in 3 years from now, but your mental foundation will always be with you, which is so important. And what happens is as you stretch, you build another layer and you stack and stack. What a wonderful place to be. And by the way, you could change your mental foundation. You could build your mental foundation at any age. I'm 53 years old. I started my company 2 years ago, even though I've been coaching for 8. I knew shit about social media. I wasn't even on social media. Podcasts, didn't even know what the hell those were. Maybe I listened to a couple. Being on stage, doing a TEDx, what are you, nuts? Then all of a sudden, I started to build. Okay, what do I need to do next? Where are the reps needed to do this? And then what happens, you start stacking these things. So days into weeks, into months, into years. And now you look back. Now time has become an ally of mine as opposed to a foe. The reason it becomes a foe if I did nothing. So, when you think about your business and how you start, I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do this. Then you build, you cement, then you do your next thing. Your decision-making gets so much better because you have evidence. Why? Because you trust yourself. People don't talk about trust enough. They don't. like how people trust themselves. And that's evidence, that's behavior, evidence-based.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because in high finance, I always say it's more about trust than it is transactions. But what you talk, and that was more oriented to getting, making sure you have integrity, you're compliant, and the external stuff. But what you're talking about is a whole dimension of that. Still about trust more than transactions. Not that it's not about the transaction. We're just saying it's a hard time getting the transaction if nobody trusts you and you're a scumbag. But I think what you're saying is like, yeah, that's good, Ryan, but trusting yourself, I think, is where it all begins. If you don't even trust yourself, that's number one.
Transformational, right? Yeah. It's not transactional. And life isn't linear, especially if you take risk. But the more you trust yourself, because you have evidence behind it, the better positions you'll be in. Not positions, I'm not saying equity and credit positions. I'm just saying positions in life. What a great place to be. But I deal in the world of risk, whether it's athletes, global CEOs, or finance people. We're in a game of risk. You better be able to fucking trust yourself. And being able to trust yourself is behavior. In the face of any emotion, you're able to stand in a sea of chaos and make best decisions. How good does that sound?
Sign me up.
Sign me up. That is practice.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect, because we always have an opportunity to be better and keep moving that needle. It's all about the inputs. It's just input. I don't like to say process anymore because it's overplayed. I care about the inputs. We are input obsessed, result focused.
I like what you talked about, thinking about what you're thinking about, right? And that's part of your slowing down. Exactly. So metacognitions, we talked about how do you remain somewhat flexible and patient without, if the market changes, especially if you're in trading, for example, like real estate, private equity might be a little bit different, but you still need to figure out how you act, not react. So metacognition is one. And then one is just clarity is power. And through that clarity and that newfound power, now you're in a position to, back to what you said earlier, make better decisions. And so now you're in your good decision zone because you're clear. You're able to slow down and think about what you're thinking about and criticize yourself in a healthy way to say, I'm just believing nonsense. Like I'm all worked up. Nothing's happened yet. I need to go for a walk, whatever. And so that metacognition, which is a high IQ thing, I think the scientists just came out and said, they said actually IQ tests need to be, they find that the highest IQ people actually have the ability, they do it naturally, which is I'm able to criticize my own thoughts and say, I don't believe that, even though I believe that. And so you can kind of like have this conversation with yourself without mental illness or issues with mental health, but in a true healthy way is to say, maybe that's an old pattern that, like as you talked about 12-year-old having.
Observe yourself, right? So the ability to observe yourself is a wonderful thing. We know we're not perfect. That's a wonderful thing. So if you give yourself enough mental space, say, what was that about? Why did I react there? Why am I thinking this way? So the greatest part about that, right, is you don't have to answer the question. You ask that question, let the unconscious start to do its work. Maybe it comes down, now I'm getting a little Freudian on you, maybe it comes out in a dream or on a walk, but it'll show its hand. You don't need to struggle with this. You need to acknowledge it and choose behavior. So I always say, it's a very intimate relationship I have with my clients, right? Because, you gotta know what's going on. Like, how are people thinking? What does their past look like? How were they wired? Why do they do what they do? And how do we create change? And why do they want to create change? Right? It sounds, it's interesting, but it doesn't happen in a day. We start to make these small mental shifts via behavior. Watch what happens. Again and again and again. So, like we this, right? Money compounds, right? 72 rule, whatever the hell that is.
Yeah,
so does behavior. Behavior compounds. Just like money. The problem is, just like in money, people don't give them a chance to compound. Because progress in the beginning is very elusive, just like money's compounding. It looks the same like it was for 4 years, and then it starts to go. Behavior is much quicker than that if you're able to tolerate the repetition of it, the boredom of it. If somebody listening to this podcast makes a change, whatever it may be, a cold shower, deciding not to react to his wife instead of counting to 3 and then responding, reply to this podcast and say, wow, that was a big difference. And that starts to build momentum. We haven't talked about momentum yet. The momentum train is the greatest. Fuck motivation. Right? When it's moving, right? Because your time matters, right? Your minutes are counting, but you're feeling in this flow, you're adaptable, you're flexible. It's just a great spot to be in.
It sure is, man. And, you talk about behavior compounding, decisions compound. I might add, and feel free, and I'd love to get your opinion, but also emotions compound. It's sometimes called emotional stacking. And that sword cuts both ways. That can really drive you into hell or actually make you elated or somewhere in between. And so my question for you is, what are some of those emotions that traders most miss on the desk? And how do you convert those into a decision-making advantage?
I lie on the other side of that. We can't control our emotions. So I've said before, and I don't mean it literally, I don't care how you feel. I care less how you feel. Because behavior changes before feelings. You can't control emotions. They come in, the amount of time you spend in joy, it's the same amount of time you spend in anger. It's just that we attach experiences to it, and that's what makes it linger. But the body works in a homeostatic pattern. So emotions, to me, it's just data. Like, do I think fulfillment and joy are important? Oh, absolutely. Do I think the service of others is important? Absolutely. But I also think you feel fulfilled. Like I said earlier, when you do what you say, I think that's very fulfilling. That is all behavior before feelings. Because when I say that, I mean, when I'm happy, I'm going to do this. When I feel more confident, I'm going to trade better or run money. It doesn't work that way. Behavior first, always. That's why people can't tolerate certain things. Feelings are the last things to change, i.e. emotions. Emotions are just data. That's all they are. Listen, would I rather feel joy than anger? Yeah, of course. But I can't control that. But if I change my behavior, the odds of me feeling joy than anger we know. So when I think about this, I'm a behavioral coach. That creates new experiences in the brain, that creates new circuitry, and the emotions are the data, and the feelings are the last to change. Because I can make you feel happy in about a second right now, and I can make you feel sad in about a second. But I don't want your behavior to change. That's true, right?
Yeah. So my question then is, when it comes, so emotions, I think we're saying, they move in and out. They're unreliable. They're just data. See it for what it is. It's just data, especially as a trader when things are moving fast. And any fund, under any asset class, you're going to have those moments where it's just barely a pulse.
Any
and
profession.
It's absolutely nuts. Yeah. Any profession. Exactly. Sports, it could be anything. But there's also you mentioned earlier, and I'd love to get this, which is kind of like the pre-prep, right? Getting ahead, getting in your decision zone, really making that and going through that mental lab ahead of time. And so you've rehearsed it so many times that you can move fast. And so what does that mental pre-market routine look like for a PM that's managing a serious book of business?
So now we're talking mind body now, right? So just before I get into that answer, the people that I deal with are in high pressure, high stress, high risk, high decision environments. So when that pressure gets too much, even though pressure is a privilege, there's got to be a way we down-regulate it, that it's still uncomfortable, we're still able to make best decisions. But when our nervous systems get attacked like this and our minds get attacked like this, sometimes it is overwhelming. We need to get into the body, working out, all these things. Why is that important? Because what happens is it lets your mind breathe. So if you're working out, I have a trainer 3 times a week. The reason why, one is phenomenal, shout out to Charles, is that it gives me a moment, an hour, 3 times a week to focus on my body and what's going on. And what's the byproduct? There's 2 byproducts. One, I get in much better shape, and my brain is relaxing. It's just a timeout. I'm not thinking about M1 and all these things I'm doing. I'm in the body now. What a wonderful place to be, that it's intentional. So when we talk about these pre-market routines, and you always hear about, man, I got a dynamite morning routine. Dynamite. I always say, tell me about your evening routine. Evening routines could be the most important thing. How you go to bed. Whether that's, I'm a big sauna guy, so I take saunas at night now. Is it journaling? Yeah, I love it. I love it. Ice in the morning, saunas at night, it's the best. But for me, what it does is a trigger. It's obviously very healthy for you. But it tells my mind and body it's time to down-regulate, right, which is for your nervous system. I want to say this again. Take a sheet of paper, draw a line down the middle. What did I do well today? And where do I want to get better? That's forward thinking. Because now we're setting up the brain. Right? Because what we're feeding it is, where do I get better? Not what I did wrong. That's not positive psychology, by the way. That's just mental reframing. Now you go to bed. Listen, sleep is king. It's king. Whether it's 6 to 8 hours, whatever you need, find out what you need. Obviously, booze is going to affect your sleep. Eating unhealthy at night or heavy at night before bed affects sleep. You get a good night's sleep. Obviously, I've got a cold mat. I got it all here in this house. But darkness, all these things count. Then you wake up, set your intentions and want to go for a workout or whatever you do. Do some breathing. If you're into meditation, then meditate. But know why you're doing it. So it's interesting. People are like, man, that's a lot. I said, then don't live in the left lane. If you want to be elite and you want to be exceptional in this and you want to go win, this is what people do. This is what people do.
Sure.
And then we get into the day,
better,
right? Yeah, this is, I don't know, go talk to 10 of your most successful people. They're not sitting on the couch all day. I can guarantee you that. Or come compete against my people, we'll eat you. So, but now what happens in the market when you got to make decisions? This is all said and good. Now it's game time. So all this is great because there is no stress on us right now, but it primes us. We're getting the mind ready. But this is where repetition comes in. Anybody could find peace at 4 a.m. What happens when the bell rings or the whistle blows and it's game time? How do we remind ourselves to be visible? Visibility is obviously opposite of invisible, and invisible is unconscious, repeating old patterns. Visibility is being conscious, being cognizant of the patterns that we want to build. What better place to build them than in the heat of the moment? And that's what we train for.
That's brilliant, man. So you talked about the somatic exercises as well. And I'm a big meditator, and I think I heard, I forget his name, coconut water guy married to Sarah Blakely.
Oh, he's awesome. Remember tomorrow.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Incredible.
Yeah. And he actually said something that I agree with and also live, which is actually my day starts at like 8 p.m. the night before. So he was like, I actually start my day, and it took me a while because you're so trained to say the day starts when I open my eyes and I'm in bed. It's like, no, it's not. The day's half gone when you open your eyes and you climb out of bed. You've already used half the day for sleeping. He said, I plan like a beast at night. And so that evening routine, and what we're talking about, where it really comes back to, especially in finance, is making effective decisions and staying in the pocket, as you eloquently said it. And so that pre-game routine or pre-market routine or pre-fundraise routine, whatever it is, have a routine. And I have a Venn diagram, and I'm not drawing it out here, but you remind me of something that I love to teach, and it's because I've developed this from my own path to realize success as I've defined it. And I always say your 3 most valuable assets in any fund manager's position is your reputation, your relationships, and your results. But what's interesting, so if you picture a Venn diagram of these 3 concentric circles, reputation, relationships, and results, and then at the center, I always say money and deals come to you. But if you see those as an asset, meaning it adds value to your personal balance sheet, your reputation adds value, your relationships add value, and your results will add value. But if you go zoom way out and put a circle around all of them, it's the 4th R that I don't normally talk about, which is rituals. That's how you add value to the things that add value. And so your rituals, or as you said brilliantly, was your behavior, good decisions. What are those rituals? Those could be mental, those could be physical, those could be spiritual, those could be relational. There's so many rituals, and like you said, a lot of it's unconscious, can be. But assessing, thinking about how you're thinking, metacognition, is one of those mental labs that we can go into. And once we have that set up, now we have the rituals that feed our reputation in a healthy way. It feeds our relationships in a healthy way. And then it feeds ultimately into our results. And at the core of all that is where opportunity comes to us.
Beautifully said. And, and to take it a step further, performance is a very simple equation. Performance equals potential minus interferences. We start taking out the interferences, almost law, addition by subtraction. And we start to really focus on behavioral change. I can't guarantee that the world changes. We're videoing this on Wednesday by Thursday. But watch what could happen. If you stick to this, I'm not saying for 5 years, do it for a week, and you will notice changes. A week. And it's so, you're going with Jesse Litton, who I think is, I don't know him personally, but we're from towns. I'm a Long Island boy also. But he says something really good. And remember tomorrow. What you do today, remember how it's going to feel tomorrow. And why it's such a powerful line, and I think it's his, and I'm pretty sure it is, when you say, okay, how am I going to feel about this tomorrow? That's causing mental space again. It really cuts off a behavior that's not going to be beneficial to you. How can one question do that? Because it creates that from reacting to causing space to say, you know what? I'm going to pass. It was just an urge, and the urge is gone. Is it that simple? Well, it's not that simple because you got to remember to do it. That's the work.
Hey, if you're finding value out of this discussion, could you do me a huge favor? Could you just take a second and hit that like or subscribe button? It costs you nothing, but it tells the algorithm that this is valuable information, and it helps us to get it to more people. Thank you. You're incredible. Now let's get back to the show.
But when you start to build these things, it's interesting when I work with traders, PMs, we never set P&L bills, ever. I said, why? They go, what do you think I could do? I said, why set it? I said, I'm not putting any limit on you. All I care about is the inputs. Like if they're not, I'll tell you what's funny, right? If they're not working out in the morning where they should, that's a crack in the foundation. I know something's up because something's off in the foundation. Little things count. And by the way, I know we don't have much time. All this stuff is not a fucking punishment. This should be highly rewarding that you are in control of what you want to do. And to be able to operate at a high level, man. And the thing about it as well, and my number one goal for people to do this, when we talk about whether it's finance, organizational, entrepreneurship, athletics, we always want to be in a seat of best decisions and to have choices. What a great place to be. Our own choices. Not choices made for us, but our own choices. So when somebody wants to go raise money and all these things, they have a belief system behind it. It's their choice. They're doing it. They have a ritual that they've been working on. We have evidence now. So now they're taking risks and that's what they want to do. And it's one of those things is that, which we didn't even talk about yet, which is one of the greatest feelings of all times, is something called regret. They did a Harvard case study, and there's a book by a nurse, and I forgot her name. I want to say it's Brene, but I may be wrong. And they did a survey about people on deathbeds. And they say, when they talked about it, do you regret doing something or not doing something? And 76% was not doing it. So when we put all this together, and we have belief, and we have evidence, and we have routine, and we have this mental framework, we're able to go make best decisions and choices that we won't regret.
Yeah, actually, it's Bronnie Wynn or something like that. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like The Regrets of the Dying. It is a fascinating read. Really puts into perspective. Yeah, and it really, I don't know if they wrote it like that or if you meant it like that, but that reminds me of something, another great philosopher, business strategist, Stephen Covey. He always talked about, forever ago, I was a kid when I read his 7 Habits.
Seven Habits, that one?
Yeah, it was a great one. Yeah, it's a brilliant work. And he talked about begin with the end in mind, which is really a stoic way of thinking, is to say, and I actually think, I'll say it live. So I always carry a silver coin with me, and it has 2 sides. Memento mori, which remembers your mortality, means you don't have enough time. And then carpe diem, which is a carpe diem, however you want to say it, which seize the day. And so it just reminds me to say, when I feel that when I'm walking and my little girl's holding my hand and we're in a mall or something, and you're like, remember, you don't have unlimited time. You don't have unlimited moments like this. And so really dialing in and being patient. I frequently, in my younger years, when I'm trying to grow my career and prove that you got something, and, my immature way of when I started my career, and you get this idea that you got unlimited chances, unlimited emotion, unlimited energy. And maybe there's a mindset place for that, but it wasn't in the best way. And so understanding that your time is limited, so appreciate it, invest it, use it wisely, because your time is also considered, in my opinion, energy. And so leverage that energy that you use as an input in your life, and just know one day when you're out of time, you're out of life. And so leveraging that opportunity, whatever that is, if it's walking down the street with your little kindergartner holding your hand, or a moment with your spouse. Yeah. I'm living those days, so I'm very lucky.
Those are good days.
Yeah, but going through that mental lab. Now, with that said, Evan, I have a question for you. I'd love, because in your previous life, we'll say, if I could phrase it that way, when you were a trader and you're doing your thing, you're living that life, things happen fast, which we're kind of talking about, that moving fast, not letting your emotions take over, just seeing it as data, metacognition, the pre-game warm up of, whether that's the night before, whatever that is. But what I think I'm hearing is that it really comes down to good decision making. But in your world, it also needed to be fast at times. Market moves quick, and you got to move quick with it. And so that's why we're talking about the pre-warm-up, so that you can be good at that. So that's a long walk to the front door. Here's my question. What would be the process that a PM can run in under 60 seconds to separate that fear-based decision from a strategy-based one?
First of all, when you talk about being a PM and a trader, this is one of the quickest feedback loops ever. You can feel the Roy G. Biv of emotions within 20 seconds. It's unbelievable. Where sports and the business world and the markets, that's where they're different. The feedback loops are much different. So when you say a 60-second, it goes back to what we were discussing. How am I feeling and why? But it's one of those things you have to be able to say it. So in the commotion of how am I feeling? I'm feeling nervous. Okay, why am I feeling nervous right now? Right, you can feel the tension in your body. All right, feel tense. Let me take a breath first to down-regulate. Let me stand up, open up my body, which will shift my nervous system. So I want to be in a place to make best decisions. You get yourself down-regulated to make best decisions. I just said that within 10 seconds. You start to do that on a daily basis. And by the way, breath is important. Standing up is important. Opening up your body, your physiology is important. This is all being done at the same time as you recognize how am I feeling and why. Now, you don't have to answer because it makes you more aware of what's going on. Open up, take a breath. Okay, where do I need to be right now? What's the proper behavior? Where's the best decision I can make right now? That's 15 seconds. Reminding yourself, okay, how am I feeling and why is acknowledgement. Pause, take a breath. That creates mental space. Ask yourself a self-exploratory question. Where do I need to be right now? What is the best decision I can make? Right now you're in the seat of influence. When we ask self-exploratory questions, we are in the seat of influence because we're conscious. When you go to a meeting and somebody asks a question, the person who asks the question usually is in the seat of influence. But when we ask self-exploratory questions, it puts us personally in the seat of influence because we're asking it. You have to ask. It's got to leave your mouth. All this stuff has to leave your mouth. It can't be lost in your head. That leads to overthinking, rumination, different narratives. So it's got to come out of your mouth. And then what happens, you're able to respond. So right now, all those things, Ryan, are conscious behaviors. And what's really interesting is the more you do that, you have the ability to get better. Why do you have the ability to get better? Because as we build consistency, we can tweak it. You cannot tweak inconsistency. So now as we have this structure down, it's not a plan, because right, we're flexible within it. We're now say, okay, where do I need to get better? But now we have something to work with because we're making conscious decisions, not unconscious, which are from the past. Now we're in the right direction. That's where we need to be. And there's your 60-second reset right there. And I think that was in 40 seconds, to be honest. If people start to do that, I don't care if you're speaking out on a desk and people think you're nuts, because they won't. Why won't they? Because when they start to see the results that you start to put up, you're going to have the whole place doing it. And it's extreme. You know what the real vibe, it's very healthy. We haven't said mental health yet. Your mental health is so important. The way I look at it is mental capital. I'm in charge of mental capital. You're in charge of financial capital. That's what I do for a living. So I got to make sure the clients that I serve have strong mental capital. We'll get nicked up here and there, of course, when the game of decision-making and risk. But how do we protect it and expand it? This way, this little reset is a wonderful first step. And everything else we talked about.
Yeah, that's right.
All this stuff is important.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital, man. And, you remind me of, there was a few months ago, every 100th episode we do, I tend to speak from the heart. And so about 3 months ago, I had my 200th episode, and we talk about the anatomy of peace. And often it's an afterthought to be like, I want peace. Maybe when I get that house or marry that person or no longer married to that person or whatever it is, I'll have peace. And we look at our circumstances as the source of peace, right? And maybe we grew up we as in people who would feel that way, they grew up in a way where all you got was external validation. You never had to think about your own stuff. And a problem with PMs, fund managers, whatever, I think, is that too often where people start to slide, you start making some decent money in your career. And so I'm speaking to everyone around the world that's listening to this, is that where it starts to we start to have trouble and we start maybe short-circuiting some of those good things that we've been doing is when we start to confuse our net worth with our self-worth. And that it starts to go a little bit sideways, because then when you do a bad trade and you lose your ass on something, and how do I feel about myself? Well, not great. Or you make all this money, then that overconfidence that we talked about earlier starts setting in. And both, when you confuse your net worth with your self-worth, it can push you when your net worth goes extreme in either direction, then you start to think about who you are and how you behave. And that is the downward slide. And you were very much really great at speaking of bad decision making. And so the anatomy of peace is not an afterthought. It's actually a strategy, and you can inject that. So we go over that. I'm not necessarily promoting the show, even though I kind of am, but what I'm talking about is peace is a strategy, right? These experiences that we have, it's not something that's nice to have. And maybe one day when my circumstances are right, or I get that girl, or I get that car, or make that trip. What we're saying is actually peace has nothing to do with that. All of those feel great.
Yeah, like, so, it's, and I'm going to gear this towards what you were saying, like, people, they always ask me what I think about work-life balance. I said, it's total bullshit. There's no such thing.
Agreed. Yeah.
Total shit. I said, but how do you create harmony is different.
Yeah.
Right? So, it's funny when people strive for peace and stuff, when they strive for like happiness and stuff like that, I think peace is the word. I think you nailed it.
That's the one.
What is peace? I'll tell you one thing. As you get older, you really start not giving a shit about what people have.
Agreed.
Right? You really don't care. Like, if they're not kind and funny and generous, and you just stay far away. Goodbye.
Right. Yeah.
But you like people who know what self-validation is and can also validate others. It's so important. When you say your self-worth is not your net worth, which I've heard before, but you said it really well in that whole context. It's so true. It's so true. Like obviously, when you start this career, you were motivated by money. You just are. You could say it's different otherwise, but what happens over a course of time, and this happened to me when I was 46, but I did think I had a heart attack. That's why I retired from Wall Street. I started being motivated by impact. And that really, and by the way, being motivated by impact actually doesn't hurt the bottom line whatsoever. You're just looking at things differently. And I am so lucky, and since you did a plug-in, I'll give a plug-in, that I became a coach. I've always wanted to do this my whole life. But I'll tell you, when I had this heart attack, which was a massive panic attack, and I had so many concussions playing ball, I was taken out of the game. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I never wanted to trade. I always wanted to be a coach or a teacher. I just happened to be pretty decent at it. And my identical twin brother, shout out to him, got me in it. But it's one of these things now at 53 years old, getting to speak on stage and we have programs coming out and working with incredible people. What a great place to be. So when you think about your hedge fund managers and people raising money, impact should be in the equation. Whether the people you're serving who are your clients that you're raising money from, or the people on your staff, how you're leading and managing, how do you create this impact? Because great cultures by great leaders breed exceptional performance. And that is impact.
You remind me of something before I get to my last question. With this, when we talked about, peace is your power and the anatomy of peace, how do we create that, right? And getting to that impact moment, or where you even want to have an impact, where you have the mental capacity, but also the emotional capacity to care. You're not cold. I know a lot of people, they kind of give Wall Street folks a hard time, like being cold and calculated and whatever. And maybe that there is an appropriate time for that. I don't make anything wrong. It's just decisions. But what I do want to talk about is the motivation behind it, which is that piece of that powers performance. There's triple P. And what I've found in my life, and anyone listening to this, including you, Evan, feel free to steal. It's all good. Call it the UVE Framework. And I classify activities, thoughts, habits, everything. So even you, everybody, I've trained myself to classify that. And one of those, I stay far away. It stands for umpires, vampires, and empires. And you fit into at least one of those. So there will be people, there'll be habits, there'll be things that you own, whatever, relationships, hobbies, they all fit into. Umpires they keep you on the rails, right? You have, let's say something ridiculous like, I'm going to have an affair on my spouse, right? Something that's catastrophic for many people. Not that, but what I'm saying is you need people around you to be like, Evan, what are you talking about? Like, have you lost your mind? That's not you. What are you doing? They keep you on track. In a formal sense, it's lawyers, accountants, but these are people that just stop you from going off the rails, and they know you good enough to know before you even see it. What's going on, man? You need those umpires in your life. Vampires, they need no introduction. They're just habits, right? People, it's easy to be like, oh, that person's a vampire. It's easy to see it in others. What about yourself? If you actually audit your life, you will find most vampire energy draining things in your life are self-inflicted. What about a messy office and you can't think straight? What about, you haven't seen your toes for a year because you've been eating so much and you can't see your feet? I'm not here to make anyone wrong. But what we're saying is there are things that are helpful and there are things that are harmful. And a lot of it all starts on the inside. And then these empires are what you talked about earlier. These are the people that are around you that are in the game. They're making moves, right? So you said, life's not linear unless you're taking risks. Then it could be very non-linear. Or you said, especially if you're taking risks. And so getting umpires and empire builders, and then also solving, and the easiest ones are to solve the self-inflicted vampires, that it tends right back to the mental game and the mental preparation is to say, let me audit my life with that lens. So feel free, anybody can use that. To say your friend Ryan filled you in on that. But what I really want is for people to win more than I want to be right. So I want everybody to win. Feel free to audit your life, your energy, your surroundings, your circumstances, and everything. Try to classify it, see which ones fit. And those are the things that drain you. Get rid of the vampires. Stay close to the umpires so they know you better than you know yourself. And then the empire builders, that's your wolf pack. These are good people that are making great moves.
What's interesting is that when you're able to take things out sometimes, when I say take things out, I'm not saying break behavior. Because it's very hard to break habits, like bad habits, whatever. Because you got to create new ones, right? Because it's easier to create than destroy, by the way. But also to understand what is triggering you. What are the things that are holding you back? And start building, if alcohol is your problem, be curious about sobriety, right? There's different shifts that can happen. If you are, you feel out of shape, you feel sluggish, get curious about what does healthy look like? What's one habit I can do? Recognize the things that are no longer serving you, right? When you talk about umpires, vampires, and empires, it's so true, right? First, check out the vampires first.
They're easy.
Right? Yeah, get those out of the way a little bit, and you'll start to see that addition is maybe not as big as you think. It's a human experience, right? I know this show is about it's about a lot of things, but it's how do you set yourself up for possibility? Whether you're a PM, a trader, a business owner, a CEO, or a CX suite, or an athlete, how am I setting myself up? And you can have expectations, right? Up here, if your training's here, not a shot in hell. It's got to be there. You got to minimize the gap between expectation and training at all times. And then what happens as we raise, we continue. And that's vampires, umpires, empires. It's all that. You got to keep that all in mind. I agree.
Yeah. And when I got rid of the vampires, here's the pleasant surprise. And I hope if anybody wants to take this life audit framework, what you'll find is when you get rid of the vampires, you realize you've always had everything you need is everything you are, right? Yeah. Everything you need is everything you are. You just couldn't see it because you were surrounded by so many bad habits, or as we talked about earlier, rituals, right? You have horrible ritual. Maybe it's drinking after to fall asleep and then you sleep like crap. Maybe it's you run to anger all the time. When any inconvenience happens, you lose your mind. No judgment here. I'm just saying it's not helpful. And so you find that when you get rid of the vampire energy draining, especially the self-inflicted ones, it all starts with taking accountability, right? Owning that side. And then you realize I am an umpire and an empire builder, just like you and just like other people. I just couldn't see it until I washed away the fog of war. Yeah. Exactly.
But how does this lead into finance? This is the mental side of this.
Well, finance is a high stakes game with high performance, high reward. Yeah, you want to win the trophy. This is one of the highest stakes careers, jobs, especially trading, but all of it. High finance is high stakes, which requires high performance.
Yeah. How are you able to make best decisions if you're living in the land of murkiness and you're not, this sounds, I know this is cliche and I've never really said it, but I'm going to say it, unless you're controlling the controllables. Like cliches are true for a reason, I guess. Unconditional love, children, all this stuff. But if you start to control the controllables and give yourself an opportunity to go win this thing and start stacking wins, I know I'm talking in my book. The mental side of this is so important. When you're overwhelmed, how do we rest and recover? How do we create mental space? Because what happens as you go out and build something gorgeous, if you're not mentally stable, mentally healthy, and have a strong mental foundation, then why the hell are we doing this? If you are not at the end finding peace and joy at the, as you're in this process, you can live in that harmony, by the way. I believe, right, and this is not positive psychology, you can have your cake and eat it too, if you play it smartly. I'm not saying it's not risk and it's going, 3 steps ahead, 1 step back, no shit, right? But we're going to move on a beautiful slope. You can have that. It's possible. Does it take effort? Everything takes effort. Talent without effort is the biggest waste.
Yeah, it is. I want to tee up my final question for you. I want to talk about some of those rituals, questions, actions, all that you can provide people. I've never told anyone, my wife knows about this. So there's a lot of firsts that are coming out on this show because this is something I care about. Because I interview people, I don't talk about myself very much. One of the things that has been supremely helpful to my performance is pick one day. Anyone can do this, and it costs you nothing. You might look silly, but bear with me. I call it Slow Down Sunday. And on that day, because things move fast, especially in high finance, you got deals, you got investors, you got partners, you got employees, you got capital, you got, there's something's on fire. And you just feel, you could get caught up in that moment and feel that pull, and you either resist it or lean into it, and neither feels great. And so you kind of feel, you can get stuck in this.
The tension.
Yeah. And so the Slow Down Sunday, while that sounds cute and all, what that specifically means is literally slow everything down. Get dressed slower, walk slower, talk slower, eat slower. What that does is when you slow it down, and you just pick one day a week or even 1 hour, whatever you want. And speaking to generally the public, what you find is slow. You talk about slow, go slow so you go fast. But what I couldn't agree more. And here specifically an actual action, what that does, at least for me, and feel free to connect with me if anyone's listening to this has a similar experience or different. But when you slow it down, I learned this from running. Actually, I ran during COVID. All the gyms were closed. It was the Nike head running coach where he purposely made you run slow. And it drives you crazy because run slow. You're running. It's supposed to be fast. What it does is when you slow it down, your brain clicks back into, I'm in control. There's something about slowing down that makes your brain say, oh, and when you feel in control, you feel calm, right? When you feel out of control, you're in bad decision mode. And so once a week, this is just what I do. Figure out if that's even right for you. I'm not giving medical advice or anything like that. I'm just saying what works for observation, not advice. But when I drive slow, not to the point where I cause accidents, but I definitely don't speed. Let's put that.
You're in the right-hand lane.
In the right-hand lane, yeah. So for the other days of the week, both physically and metaphorically, I'm in the fast lane. But for one day, slow it down. Just if you want to have Slow Down Sunday, walk slow, get dressed slow, eat slow, slow it down. What that does is it's not slow. It's reminding your brain you're good, you're in control. And I don't have that mantra and these repeat affirmations, none of that. It's automatic. Automatically that happens is when you run slow. Running slow isn't about going slow. It's about being controlled, executing with control. It's same with physical performance as it is with financial performance in what we do. Go slow so that you can go fast, but going slow trains your mind to remind yourself, I got this. Everything's good. We're in control. Try it.
What a great act of intentionality. Yeah. I'm going to give it a go. I mean, listen, I practice all this crap, obviously. Yeah, that's what I do for a living. But I've never done that one.
Yeah, send me a text. Let me know. Slow Down Sunday.
My kids, my friends are like, I think something's wrong with him.
They will think that. They're like, why?
They do say that I'm doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. If if they're concerned, if you're getting arthritis and
Mom,
you're
I think there's something wrong with Dad. Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten it. Yeah. So my question, so that's my advice. I pre-answered that because I wanted you to have the final answer. So given any fund manager, this typically who follows the show, fund manager, anyone in high finance who's listening, what's one daily action, one daily question, maybe one metric that will tell them in 7 days whether their problem is a skill, a process, or psychology? What are some of those rituals or whatever that might be to help people diagnose?
I haven't said this one in a long time, and I'm going to bring it out from my mental arsenal. I would take a piece of paper. We're talking about emotions as data, and we're in the behavioral game and how it creates new experiences and all that. Draw a line down on a piece of paper. Anytime you're about to react, put a check mark on the left. When you feel like you're in control, put a check mark on the right. Do that for a week. All of a sudden, you'll be like, wow, I was about to react. You're going to start to realize how important the things that we just discussed are. You start putting check marks. Oh, I'm about to do that. Okay, I just saw that. Check mark. Watch what happens. Like, I haven't used this one in a while, and you kind of put me on the spot. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. You're going to look at this thing and be like, wow, it's a lot of check marks. Watch what happens the next day. Now, you don't want to have a lot of check marks, so I'm going to be a little more conscious. All of a sudden, the next day, there's less check marks on the left side. There's more on the right side. This may sound so elementary. Watch what happens. I'm literally a piece of paper, fold it in half and put a line down. and put reaction, responding, and keep count of how you're doing it. Now remember, so it's almost impulsivity and intuition. Reacting is impulsive. Even the feeling of you're about to react, check mark. Send Ryan Miller an email and tell me how that after 7 days. But you got to do it. Can't think about it. Make it a ritual for 7 days. And by the way, these markets are going to give you a lot of opportunity to put check marks on either side of the column. What is that doing? That is making you more aware. And you're going to be really caught by 10 o'clock. You're like, wow, I have 47 check marks on the left side. I almost reacted. You'll know how important understanding emotions as data and choosing conscious behavior really is. That is
it's your mic drop moment.
That's my mic drop moment.
Yeah, I love that. So final word. This has been phenomenal, Evan. This is good. Are there final thoughts, anything else you want people to know? Maybe ways they could reach out if they want to learn more about you. Just you're a cool guy, just ways that they can just connect with you and the cool things they got going on. Maybe they want to bump their performance. Maybe they just want to be buddies with you. How can people connect with you? Final thoughts.
Well, we actually, obviously what's going on in the markets and the chaos and uncertainty, which I always think is an advantage if you're mentally detrimental game. We actually have something called the M1 Mental Trading Academy that's coming out May 1st. It's a 6-week boot camp based on the things we just discussed. It's what I coach at 0.001% that are my clients. It's a 6-week boot camp. You can go to m1performancegroup.com. Go to the website. It'll be there for you if you're interested in signing up. I also do one-on-one, and we have, obviously on podcasts, and I actually have a TEDx talk, which is about post-traumatic growth that's coming out tomorrow, which is wonderful. So you can see that on YouTube. And that's where you can find me. We're on LinkedIn. We're on social media as emark72 on Instagram. LinkedIn's Evan Marks. And if I could leave, leaving a thought is we are way more capable than we think we are. And I truly believe the real edge is mental. And once you really start to train that edge, you'll thank yourself for a long time.
That's brilliant, brother. So just to summarize everything that we talked about, get yourself into a good decision zone. We talked about a lot of strategies that Evan recommended. The other one is days can start the night before. So have those routines. However you start it, have those routines to add clarity to your mind so that it drives performance. And finally, go slow to go fast. Try a slow down Sunday if you think that's cool. Not to go slow, but to remind yourself from the inside out that you're in control. You do these things, and you too will be well on your way in your pursuit of making billions.